welcome everybody to 410Z Fall for the Book, Expect Great Things. Ollie Mason is a 501c3 nonprofit organization affiliated with George Mason University and the National Osher Lifelong Learning Network that provides classes, lectures, trips, clubs, social, and other activities for over 1,000 active learners ages 50 and up. Over 500 college-level courses covering a broad range of subjects are offered each year. Programs are presented in person and at the Fairfax campus, at satellite campuses throughout Fairfax County, and online. If you enjoy this program, we encourage you to become an Ollie member so that you can register for our upcoming classes and events, especially more Fall for the Book classes as well. You can learn more about Ollie Mason by visiting our website at olliegmu.edu, which I will be putting in the chat as well if anybody needs that. This program is co-organized with Fall for the Book, and on behalf of Ollie Mason, I'd like to extend our gratitude for this continued partnership. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kate Lewis so we can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Richard, so much. And we want to thank you for being a partner with Fall for the Book for so many events, and especially for this one today. Well, hello, audience, and welcome to the Expect Great Things event at our 27th annual Fall for the Book Literary Festival. My name is Kate Lewis, and I'm the marketing director for Fall for the Book. Fall for the Book will continue through October 11th, and then we'll return in the spring for our year-round programming. For the most up-to-date information on the festival and our organization, please visit fallforthebook.org. If you're interested in supporting our free literary events, consider becoming a friend of the festival. After this event, you will receive a short virtual survey, which I will put in the chat. And we really do appreciate your feedback, which will help us to improve the festival in the future. If you'd like to purchase a copy of Expect Great Things, How the Katharine Gibbs School Revolutionized the American Workplace, please use the links in the video description. And for those of you here live, I'll put those in the chat as well. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce the moderator for this Fall for the Book and Ollie event, Harper Kincaid. Harper is a USA Today and Amazon national bestseller author of historical fiction and creative nonfiction. Lauded by Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly, BuzzFeed, Fresh Fiction, Booklist, and the Washington Post, Harper's works have been published by the Washington Parent Media, Writer's Digest Magazine, Crime Reads, Entangled Publishing, Crooked Lane Press, Throat Punch Media, Zibby Books, and Medium. Harper is a former historian specializing in gender history and is currently a licensed clinical psychotherapist specializing in women's mental health, especially the neurodivergent. I'm thrilled to welcome you, Harper, to Fall for the Book. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Fall for the Book. Thank you, Osher Lifelong Learning, and Richard for the tech support. I am tickled hot pink to be here, and I cannot wait to introduce our guest, our writer, our historian, our historical record amender. There's so many titles we can give. We are here with Vanda Kreft. She's written about women's issues, popular culture for leading national magazines, including Elle, The Red Book, Women's Day, Women's World, so many others. She really undersold her writing experience in her bio, can I just tell you? Expect Great Things. That's what we're here about. It's a social history of the Katharine Gibbs School for Women. It's her second book. I really urge you, if you love the combination of biography and social history, also to check out her first book, the author of The Man Who Made the Movies, the first in-depth biography of 20th Century Fox founder William Fox. We are so thrilled to have you. Let's everyone come help me welcome Vanda Kreft. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Harper, for that terrific introduction. That's very kind and very generous.
Yeah, it's all the truth. You know, that's I cannot tell a lie, as they say. So let me actually I can. I'm just not going to do it here. All right. So I'm going to say that first of all, I have the copy of the book right here. and have been reading it. And there's all these sorts of little underlines and exclamation points
Mhm.
because I was just so excited about this. So I'm going to jump right in and notice that, and we've talked about this. We did a little pre-interview. You like to write about the powerful people, the change makers in an industry that
Mhm.
somehow time has forgotten. And what an amazing gift to be able to source out these people who were so important that we don't remember.
Mhm.
What is it that draws you to amend the historical record in this way? By the way, this is a three-parter. Take whatever part you want.
Okay,
I don't
right,
want to
right.
overwhelm you. But what
Mhm.
draws you to amend the historical record in this way? What
Mhm.
drew you to Katharine Gibbs and her school? Um,
Mhm.
and why is it important?
Okay. I'll start with the first part of that. What draws me to these people who have
Yeah.
been overlooked? I think when you undertake a big project, which, a project like a book, which is going to consume you for years and consume a lot of your mental energy, you have to, I think, have a sense of mission. I feel that in both these cases, both Catherine Gibbs and William Fox, that these were people who did really important work, who changed history, changed the culture, and who, for one reason or another, had been overlooked, had been forgotten, or their accomplishments were dismissed or suppressed. So I felt these people, I really liked them too. I felt that they were very sincere in what they did and that they wanted to do good,
Mm,
and that it just wasn't fair
mm,
to have them erased from the historical record. So that's what really drew me to these both of these people,
yes.
and and to say I want to put them in the record, like they're going to be on the bookshelf, so you can find them, and
Yeah.
they are a part of history. I think the other thing that drew me to both of these people is I like people who do things they're not supposed to,
Mm,
who come out of nowhere and do accomplish great things.
yes.
And that's true for both Catherine Gibbs and William Fox. To take William Fox first, because he's a third, his formal education went as far as the third grade. He was a
Mm,
third grade dropout, raised in poverty on the Lower East Side, and he starts a major movie studio. He
yeah.
builds it from nothing. So that really attracted me. How does he do that? In the case of Catherine Gibbs, we have a middle-aged housewife
Yes.
who has a high school education. She's perfectly happy being a housewife and a mother with two young sons. And then all of a sudden, her husband dies in a freak accident. And what does she do? She builds this very successful business, again, starting from nothing.
Yeah.
And what does she do? She teaches in many students, many of whom are college graduates, Seven Sisters graduates, and she teaches them how to get an elite job. And
Yeah.
by the way, when she starts her school, she's never worked outside the home a day in her life.
I know.
So
Amazing.
it just completely unqualified for what she did.
Yeah.
But she was driven. She too had a sense of mission. She thought that the way that women were treated was unfair, and she was going to do something about it. And that's what motivated her. So I think, what draws me to these people, it's a sense of, two parts. Like one is give them what they deserve, what they
Yes.
have not gotten historically. And
Right.
then second, for me, figuring out how did they do this? I think
Absolutely.
starting out with a question is really more helpful than starting out thinking you know what the story is, but you want something to unravel. And that was in both cases, well, how did Catherine Gibbs do this? And how did she have the courage to do this? And how did she put it together? Because again, you have somebody who's really starting with nothing. I mean, her husband left her to
Yes.
high and dry when he died.
It's true. That was a reoccurring theme of her life, of the men of her life, her father, her
Mhm.
brothers. Like, I mean, talk about like the universe wanting to hit you over the head. Like, this isn't going to work out
Right,
for you the way that you did. But
right.
instead of, I mean, listen, if I for those who are graduates of Katharine Gibbs, you already know that. For people, if this is brand new to you, like you're just going to fall in love with Katharine Gibbs. And it's funny how
Mhm.
you said earlier about like, you have to like your subject and you also have to have these questions. I was thinking as you're saying that, yeah, it's like you're dating. And then once you pick your subject, like now you're in this marriage and
That's
because you've spent up to 10 years researching a book. So this is a
right.
commitment on your part. So, but I can
Hmm.
totally see why. So Catherine, so this is what so I'm sorry, I've got 10 thoughts at once.
No, go ahead.
I love that when people come and they say, "Oh, isn't she just like the lead of a secretarial or finishing school?"
Hmm.
And the women's historian in me goes, like wants to choke
Yeah.
on it.
Hmm.
But kudos to her. She was like, "Well, that might be what gets you in the door."
Hmm.
She had this Trojan horse strategy. Like
Yes.
she was so beyond her time. She was doing brand management, social media in terms of advertising, in terms of
Hmm.
image. Like she had a dream and a mission that was just like you said, so much bigger than her story, so much bigger than her education.
Hmm.
And like, yes, you're going to come in and you're going to learn how to type. Oh, also, we're going to work on your dress. We're going to work on your social skills. We're going to give you an education. We are going to make you like such beyond the triple threat, right?
Right, right, right.
So can you like talk to me about her Trojan horse strategy and how
Hmm.
she really like shepherded these young women?
Okay. I think context is also really important, the context of the times.
Yes, please.
She realized, okay, well, her goal was because, again, coming out of her experience, where, as you mentioned, she was left high and dry by these men,
Yeah,
not fulfilling their responsibilities one way or the other toward her. Her mission was young women, what happened to her should never have to happen to any other woman. And that, okay, so how does she do that? What is the goal? The goal is that graduates of her school will always be able to support themselves comfortably,
yes,
nicely, not just scraping by, but and always be able to get a job. So
mhm,
that, and she was not exclusively, you have to have a career and give up every other
that's
aspect
right.
of your life. You want to get married and have a family? That's fine. You want to take some years off and, to raise your children? That's fine. But you will be so qualified, and you'll have such crackerjack skills that when you're ready to come back to the workforce, people will be lining up to hire you. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, and she also had a policy where if you've been out of the workforce for any number of years, you can come back for a free refresher course. They'll polish you up and get you ready to go out again. So that was the goal. So how do you get there? In the context of our times, and I think it's really important to understand what was going on historically,
Please.
socially, because if we look back now, you would say, well, why would you go to a secretarial school? Why don't you go to law school? Why don't you go to medical school? Why don't you go to business school if you
Right.
want that career? Well, the answer is you might well want to. Lots of luck getting in back then
That's
because
right.
the prestigious professional schools, law, business, medical, are not taking women, or they are taking them in minuscule proportions, like 2, 3%. So that's not really a very viable option for you. Okay, so
That's right.
she looks at the landscape and she says, what's the quickest way for ambitious, young, smart women, what's the quickest way for them to get to that job where they will have security and they'll have a really nice income? And P.S., they'll also be doing work that they enjoy. And that was a key part of it. You have to find what you love, find an industry that you love, or find a function within,
Yeah,
that you
she was
grasp.
not a one-stop. She was not I'm going to have you like, even though there was something called the Gibbs girl,
Hmm.
she was, and that there was some standards, and yet, which is something that's I find very unusual and shows to her savvy and emotional flexibility. But she was like, but you're really good at numbers, but you're really good at the
Yeah.
social protocol. Like she
Hmm.
didn't expect it wasn't military, it
Right,
was,
right,
and
right.
so
And it
that,
also and it also wasn't, you're going to be a secretary for life. It's
Right.
going to be, this is the way that you get in the door.
Right.
This is what is now the Trojan horse aspect is, okay, we're going to polish you up
Yep.
into the perfect secretary. And
Yes.
then the male executive is going to say, "Oh, wow, this is, the secretary of my dreams.
Yes.
She's going to take care of me. She's going to,
Yeah.
charm the guests. She's going to have the office organized perfectly. She's going to fix my grammar
Yep.
if I don't know how to write a good letter. She's going to make me look really good."
Yes.
What he's not realizing is that she's got her eye on his job or maybe even the one above it.
That's
And
right.
that's and so the Gibbs graduates would decide how far do they want to go. Now, some of them would be very happy just remaining in an executive secretary
Hmm.
position. It fits better into their lives. But others want much more.
That's right.
And they are, and we spoke a bit about the rigor of the education. One of the purposes of that was not just that they would have excellent skills. That certainly is a big component of it, but that in meeting those standards, they build up their confidence because
Yes.
there's so many at that time, especially so many aspects of the social environment that are telling them, you should just get married and be a housewife,
Right.
or you can't do that. So this is really, I think it's very empowering for them to meet these standards, regardless of what that particular skill is. So, you might learn the typing and you might never use the typing because
That's
some of
right.
them didn't. But what they use is the confidence, I never thought I could do that. I never thought I could type, 100 words a minute,
Right.
but I did. I did.
That's right. And she builds on the skills. Let's talk about the Gibbs girl. There's a lot of myths also around of who that was. I think you
Hmm.
really spoke to it that yes, there was the Seven Sisters, sort of, influx as well.
Hmm.
But I got to tell you something that she really opened it up also to the working class and middle class. I think
Yep.
that what a
Hmm.
lot of the record, and this is where what you talked about so beautifully about we have to understand the history and the context. Like what we think of, oh, she only had mostly white women. Well, first of
Hmm.
all, it was what was available. It was also like, I hate to say it, like Irish back then was not considered white. Italian wasn't considered white. Jewish wasn't considered white. Like there was a different standard of what
Hmm.
that was.
Hmm.
And if someone came in, yes, I'm going to teach you to type. I'm going to teach you how to do a perfect T set thing and the grammar and what's the social protocol for certain situations. But I'm also going to help you learn corporate speak. I'm going to help you learn this industry. I'm going to help you learn sort of the inside baseball of what this is, right?
Right,
And
right.
um, she also, I gotta just say it. So this is, I'm like half fangirling with my questions and half, so I apologize for that. I promise I'm getting to a question. What what really struck me, like I actually was reading the book and I'm getting emotional because there was this moment where she's like, well, what do you do if someone says, well, why should you have this job? You're taking it from a man, or, this is not a ladylike thing to do. She would prep them for these questions. She
Hmm.
would give them, and in a very socially graceful way, not in this combative way. Like
Hmm.
she literally looked at every aspect of what they were going to do.
Hmm.
And I got to tell you, like, do we have this for young people today? You're a Penn graduate, a bachelor's and master's, Phi Beta Kappa. Did you have this? Did I have this?
I didn't. Yeah, yeah.
Tell
And
me, like, what do you wish you had, and what do young people have today? What don't they have that we
I,
can learn
I,
from the Gibbs girl?
yeah, well, I can speak to what I didn't have, and I didn't really have any preparation for the working world. It was
Yeah.
just this sort of academic ivory tower. Um, I think also one thing I didn't mention earlier, which I should have, is what time frame we're talking
Yes,
about here.
please.
So we're talking about the early to the mid 20th century.
Yes.
School starts in 1911. and I take it up to 1968,
Yes.
which is actually was a very convenient stopping point because it's the point where Catherine Gibbs' son, who's now running the school, he sells the school, but it's also, as you know, we remember, or as we know, a time of tremendous social change.
That's
You've
right.
got the second wave feminine, the women's liberation movement.
Yes.
So the school at that point really had, I think, largely accomplished what its mission was. So it was part of that movement. But to get back to the question of, did I have any of this sort of thing? I certainly didn't. We were reading, I was an English major, reading lots of classic literature, but nobody said, and frankly, um, there was no job counseling either.
Mm.
Here's your degree. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
But and go figure it out yourself. And I
that's
look
right.
back and I think, well, I didn't know it. I, take responsibility myself. I should have been asking these questions too.
But
But
sometimes you don't know what you don't know,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I want to give
yeah.
you a little grace on that one
Okay.
because I
Thanks.
do, because I mean, you don't, it's a whole other world. I think about how she prepped them, and I think
Hmm.
about the mistakes that I made in my 20s. And I'm like, if
Mm-hmm.
someone would have given me the talks that Catherine Gibbs had given her students,
Hmm.
that would have saved me such heartache.
What would you have wanted to learn?
I would have, it's still something I'm not good at. I would have learned maybe not to overshare, to listen and ask questions more.
Hmm.
I would learn to be able to look beyond the scope of what just my job is and how can I volunteer more, how
Hmm.
to handle hostility over something that's inherent to me. There were times where I was like patted on the head or really underestimated. And
Hmm.
sometimes I had a chip on my shoulder about that.
Hmm.
And my goodness, if I had just been given this a few other reframes, like,
Hmm.
and it's something that I look at a lot of the young people out there who
Hmm.
are, oh, but you're not using the right way to speak to me and you're asking me to do more or to work too much. And
Hmm.
we don't want people being abused. But then in the same instance, there's this other aspect of making yourself irreplaceable.
Yes, exactly. Right. And one of the things that she taught, one of the things that the school taught was do everything. You can't volunteer for everything in the
Yes.
job. And as you say, like don't ever share, keep your personal life separate. Even if there was, she had a wonderful statement of even if, your personal problems are so much more important and so much larger than what's going on in the office, keep them out because that's not what you're there to do.
Right.
Something else to your question of what do I wish I'd learned, one of the things that was a real core principle of the Catherine Gibbs School was career planning. And that first 5 years is really crucial. And keep your eye on what comes next. I wish I'd known that. I really do.
Totally.
Um,
Right.
and also don't be afraid to leave.
That was another one. Talk
Yeah,
more about that.
she
That's really
was
switched back and forth through times. That used to be like you must stay a year at least.
right.
You must just endure. Now we're having people jumping ship all the time. She was
Hmm.
somewhere in between. Share more about that.
Yes. Well, her philosophy was that, if you're in the wrong place, if they don't treat you decently, then just come back to us because the fact was they had many more job openings. Employers would come to them and they had many more openings than they had graduates to fill. And there
Was
was
that
one
because of the
woman,
World War I piece where all the men were going off to war and they had
it
these
was
openings?
It was throughout this period.
Okay.
So really really the school got going at World War I for the reason that you just mentioned. And then really throughout, really hit its heyday, I would say in the 40s and 50s and early 60s. But that was true. It was such a prestigious education to have that every employer wanted a quote Gibbs girl. I think there was some policy you have to stay for 6 months or something like that. But the one woman that I interviewed, she said she went to a manufacturing company and the men were very sexist. They referred to women as broads and they were just insulted. And she was not going to put up with that. And she, as I recall, she was from a working class family. So it wasn't as if she didn't need this job or didn't need the money. She left, I think, after, a brief time, probably a month or two, if I'm recalling correctly. And I said, well, gee, when you went back to Catherine Gibbs, did they look askance at you because you didn't stay long? She said, no, they said you did the right thing.
I
And
love
what
that.
did they do? They hand her a job lead to work at a gourmet magazine, which was then to work for the publisher.
Oh,
And it was in the
very high,
penthouse.
very prestigious magazine. The
Right,
day of
but
magazines, right?
right, but also, where's it located? The penthouse of the Plaza Hotel. So she walks through the Plaza Hotel lobby every morning. She sees, Cary Grant and,
Oh my
a
goodness.
bunch of celebrities. Marlena
Yeah.
Dietrich comes up, to the office one day. So she loved that job. She subsequently went into advertising and she did very well. She became an advertising copywriter. So that was the idea. Like you don't have to take what
You
somebody
have
else's.
dignity. You have
Yes,
dignity.
exactly. And if that is not accorded to you at your employer, walk away because you're better than that and you can do better. And just the fact of, they didn't punish her. They didn't say, well, you
It's
left
such a
your
whole
job.
other thing, right? When you
Hmm.
think about it, this is something of she took you back. She like was like, we've got you. We're going to figure something out for you. We're not going to blame the victim. We're going to, make sure that we've got your back. Uh,
Hmm.
it's almost like when she like talk about that World War I period, the country is in a not in a great place and her school is struggling. World
Hmm.
War One happens, all the male secretaries are going off to war. She
Hmm.
doubles down and finds like, I'm going to have the most beautiful schools in the most amazing locations.
Hmm.
I'm going to like put more into it instead of the courage that took, you
Yeah,
know?
right, right.
And,
Hmm.
and then how that actually uh, trickles down to each student.
Yes. And,
So,
and I think the genius of being able to recognize that opportunity, and it's really very simple, but everybody misses it. Is
yeah,
like, oh, because at that point, 1970, the teens, the executive secretaries were almost all male. Why? Because it's considered a springboard into management. So we're
right,
training you, where you're going to kind of be shadowing the big cheese and you're going to
right,
learn how they do things. You're going to make contacts. And she sees those guys are all getting shipped out.
right.
And
Yeah,
who's going to
those
fill those
spaces.
desks? But it's so simple, but
But
it's really quite brilliant.
revolutionary.
Yes, right. And
That
that's what really gets going.
Sorry, I don't mean to speak over you. I
No,
get
go
a
ahead.
little excited. You've known this about me, so it's only
Hmm.
coming from a place of excitement, not wanting to talk over you. So I apologize.
Oh, no, go ahead.
But that's another piece of it in terms of. So I was, women's historian, and I'm going to tell you, we spend a lot of time the suffragettes and then second wave feminism, and there's this
Hmm.
lacuna in the record which you have filled.
Hmm.
I think if for the George Mason people listening, this book needs to be part of those classes because we do need books that really amend the historical record. So that's my little pitch for the book to be part
Thank
of
you.
any curriculum.
Hmm.
But it's the pragmatist part of activism. It's
Hmm.
a pragmatistic accommodationalist sort of approach. It's like we're not looking like the revolutionary stuff of going on a hunger strike and burning a bra, which actually most people really never burn bras, but anyway,
Hmm.
but we get that idea.
Hmm.
That's sexy and very loud, but this is just as important and strategic and thoughtful. And I'm just so glad that you were able to see this
Oh, thank
in
you.
the
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you with everything you've said. It's a very pragmatic approach, and the radical activists, they raise consciousness, they put,
Yes, important.
they put the big issues out there. They get people stirred up. But is that going to, at the ground level, is that going to change, the minds of the people who are in power?
That's right.
Not really. So I think you need both components. And what Catherine Gibbs is doing is she's moving, the Trojan horse in there. And then these guys are looking, the bosses, the male bosses are looking and says, she's really good. She's really competent. And you need to win them over. And they're the ones who promote these women who see that they're not feather-brained. They're not,
Yeah.
they don't get flustered when there's a
And
crisis.
not delicate. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. They can do it and they can often, save the boss's bacon sometimes. So
Yes.
they become very valuable. And I think that's how on the ground level you change hearts and minds,
Exactly.
oh,
It's through relationship. It's through the boots on the ground, but in a very different kind of a way.
yes, yeah, yeah. And proving yourself and then getting in there and guess what, you do the job. And that is really important.
Really. I got
Yeah,
to ask you another question. So, talking about like the revolutionary sort of loud in your face, and again, there's a place for that. We're not,
right.
disparaging it. It depends on the time. It depends on what's going on, these strategic points in history. It is also, I'm just giving you this as a compliment as a fellow historian. It's a very slippery slope, a seductive mistress to only look at your superstars of
Yes. Oh, yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
exceptionalism. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is something that we've seen within other social reform movements that so you see the person who, came out of poverty and becomes, the head of a company or what have you. And those are important. But one of
Mm-hmm.
the things I love, love, love what you do.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Uh-huh.
because I don't see it a lot. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you share with us some of the shining stars,
Mm-hmm.
and you also share some of the people who, and everything in between, but also the people who maybe never, for whatever reason, didn't really get to shine. In fact,
Yes.
they didn't get to really prosper at all. And then you talk to those descendants. Anyway, please
Mhm.
share that process and who were some of your favorites? Like who were some of the
Okay.
ones? Anyway,
Yeah, I think, I felt that was an important component to include was to show really what was at risk, some of the lives that didn't turn out. And one of the ones that I found really most touching was the story of Jill DiDonato, who was from a working class family in Princeton. Her father was an Italian immigrant, a contractor. And she, according to everybody in her family, I interviewed a cousin who was just in awe of Jill. She said, "Oh, I thought she was a princess. She was pretty. She had a great fashion sense. And she just looked like a
yes,
winner." And she kind of she'd been in like high school theatricals, but conservative family, conservative, no, you're not going on
yeah,
stage. But so she goes to Katharine Gibbs in New York. She unfortunately is very demanding. She's keeping up with it. The teachers are telling her, she's getting C's, and her parents don't understand that a C is okay,
yeah,
in this context. And so she's very close to her parents. She really feels she's disappointing them. She tries, the teachers are saying, you're doing well. You're one of the really good students here. But she just, um, something, she just, I guess, doesn't quite believe in herself enough, or it doesn't kind of register. And it's also at a time, this was like, I think the late 40s, the mid to late 40s. So the culture's changing and it's really glorifying marriage and motherhood because you've got, again, the broader picture, you've got the soldiers coming back from war,
right.
they want their jobs back and they want
Okay.
to push women out of the labor force so they can have those jobs. So how do you do that? You glorify the family, the
Very true.
home. So she ends up dropping out of the second year of the program. And I interviewed her daughter, who was really, really lovely and really helped me a lot.
Yes.
And poor Jill has these, marries these guys who are not great. And then she, she died at an early age. I think it was kidney disease, and she had some transplants, and they didn't work. And it was just tragic, the sense of the possibility, the potential. But her daughter, Jackie, was telling me, that she felt so blessed to have Jill as her mother for the time. I think she was 7 when
Mm.
Jill died, but she just thought her mother was terrific. So just a sense of it was for me, that was a very moving story because you could see and I think if the culture had been different, I think that really was it. If she, had more in the broad
Yeah.
context of support, of encouragement of what you're doing. But I think Catherine, according to what I heard from her daughter, the school was telling her, you're doing okay.
It
You're doing
reminds
well.
me of what I hear today. One of my last permutations, I was in grad school, I had a tutoring business, and I would always farm out the STEM stuff because that's obviously not my forte.
Hmm.
But the biggest thing I would hear from my STEM tutors is they'd have these students coming to them with C's and D's and like in engineering or physics, and how the professors, the good ones, would say, this is typical. Like this is a whole new way of thinking. Stick
Hmm.
with it, right?
Hmm.
And they
Yeah,
would panic like I've never had anything less than an A or a B in my life. And
right, right. Hmm.
but like there's some parts of education when it's really utilizing other parts of the brain, other muscle memory things, what have you, that to
Hmm.
be given the grace to fail for a while,
Yeah,
until you succeed. And
yeah.
so some people had that support, whether it's their families, their teachers, but some didn't. And they probably, I mean, like with Jill, the pressure must have been immense, and there was plenty of those. And you
Right,
share
right.
stories all in between as well. You know,
Right, right. Yeah. Another one was Jane Fonda's mother,
oh
Frances.
yes,
Yeah. Who,
brilliant woman.
and from what I could tell, she really had a lot of potential, a lot of financial acumen,
Yes,
but got scared. She had a horrible, horrible childhood. And just, she married a millionaire who was abusive. He left her some money. She marries Henry Fonda, and he does not treat her well, and he's ready to divorce her.
yes.
And so she ended up, committing suicide. So again, if somebody had just, what is lost there, that potential, if somebody had built her up, and encouraged her to stick with it, develop some skills, or for heaven's sakes, when Henry's getting rid of you, squeeze the money out of him and go back to New York and
And
do
do
a
your thing.
refresher course. Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
there's some that talks about the heart of this is where my psychotherapist part comes in, but
Hmm.
resiliency. And I think that for some people, and what I've seen in my experience, whether it's with career, whether it's with love, sometimes there are people who can kind of just, I hate it, like they dust themselves off and they reinvent themselves, and which is we almost want to be able to teach that, right? But there's a
Hmm.
lot of us, we get our hearts broken maybe one too many times. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I thought of when I read that part about
Uh,
Frances.
okay. Just said too many strikes against her or
Like
too
those
many.
childhood had been so horrific
Yeah. Yeah.
that there wasn't enough built for her for whatever reason. And not
Hmm.
to blame, like, oh, what makes one person being able to rise above it or to figure it out versus someone else who's just like, that's all my heart can take. It's
Yeah.
not about a blame or what have you. It's about understanding the fragility and the
Yeah.
delicacy.
But I wonder if there had been, if the sort of social climate had been different, if she had had what we have today, which is
Yes.
much more inclusive
Yes.
attitude and an understanding that of course you're going to have a career or you have
Yes.
this skill and you'd be really great at this, so you really should pursue it. That was not part
Not
of,
there.
in the 30s. Those were the Depression years when,
Oh,
I
yes.
think the poverty of her early childhood, that fear of you're going to go back there, and she latches on to the these the millionaire and then the movie star.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, that was always a question. I'm not saying that would necessarily would have made a
No, I think
difference,
it's all
but
the above, right? It's all the
yeah.
above. It's never, we always love to just do a binary and either or when it's an and, right?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's a person's personal sort of reserves coupled with their environment, coupled with the times,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Right.
So speaking of that, so now I'm going to pivot a little bit. So
Hmm.
you're this biographer and social historian, you're picking your subjects. This story in particular, I would imagine it may be starting off as a biography of Katharine Gibbs,
Hmm.
but then really becomes a social, historical record amender and
Hmm.
from goes from micro to macro and
Right.
all
Hmm.
back and forth. That is not as easy as it looks on paper. So again, that's my fangirl moment.
Uh-huh.
You're sitting there, you're in the solid, being a writer, being a researcher is a very solitary practice.
Hmm.
And you're just like you said, are you coming in with a question? Or are you coming in thinking that something is a certain way? Like this is the story I'm going to tell. You're doing
Hmm.
this research and it's not quite what you thought it was going to be.
Right, right. Hmm.
So could you share with us like the joys and surprises with this book and the challenges that you experienced
Hmm.
in the
The,
research
f-
process?
sure. The first challenge was that yeah, I initially started off thinking, oh, I'll write a biography of Katharine Gibbs. Well, she died in 1934, and
Ah,
the school really is, on an upward trajectory at that point, and it's going to really hit its, greatest years in the late 40s through the
after
mid
her.
60s. Right. So fortunately, the son took over,
Yes.
and he very much stuck with her mission. But so when I realized that, I thought, that's going to be a brochure if I stick with just the Catherine Gibbs, and I'm going to miss out on the important part of the story, which is, when it reaches its height. So that made me switch from, well, you can't do a biography. You could do, I would say, like social history slash group biography
Yes.
of Catherine Gibbs. And then the graduates to show how her philosophy, her mission it plays
Outlived
out in
her.
the lives of these graduates, how they realize that dream, or in some cases, how they go astray from it. Because, that's the other thing. You mentioned fragility, and that's a big, it's not a sure thing that you're going to win. I mean, as you said, there's
Right.
so many factors. Um, so my challenge then is, okay, I've got to extend it out. I have to rethink this project as, the social history slash group biography. The biggest challenge I would say was finding these women because they didn't really show up very much because what they did was not considered important. I would
Mm,
go to, newspapers.com, okay, which is such a wonderful resource. But I would put in, Catherine Gibbs, graduate, all kinds of variations of that. And what pops up overwhelmingly, engagement and marriage announcements, overwhelmingly. Even for these women who I knew had, impressive jobs, impressive positions.
yeah.
They just weren't there.
Oh, that's
In a few places they were, but what I realized is it was largely dependent on their having had friends or relatives who valued them and who would say collect their papers. There
yes.
was one woman, Catherine Brandt, who worked with Ray Baker on this very long, and by the way, I believe wrote the last two volumes for which he won the Pulitzer Prize.
Hmm.
I believe that
She did.
the evidence
Absolutely.
shows that she did. Okay. So I think she had friends who said, this isn't fair. And well, first of all, she kept her papers, and that
Yes.
was important. And then she had friends who said, this is important. We're not throwing it away, and donated it to Smith College. And so
Beautiful.
there it is. But it's really just chance. A lot of it was chance. I think one of my biggest regrets about the book is I know there are people I've left out because I simply couldn't find them.
Mm,
And I wish I had found them. I know there are, probably many women who did great things. And
absolutely.
they simply, because what was important is, are you getting married?
Right.
That's what was
The time.
recognized, covered. So,
It's such an interesting, so that's part of your regret. You were going through this, first of all, there's so the trash cans of the world are lined with researchers who hit a snag that something wasn't what they thought and it's abandoned projects.
Mm-hmm.
So the 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 if I could speak, the adaptable nature of your thinking and that emotional flexibility uh, is really so important. I want to ask you though, all these skills for being a writer, a biographer, and a historian, there
Mhm.
are some pieces of that that must be inherent to you, that came easily to you, and there must be some parts of it that were skills that were, oh, this is something that I am not as good at or I don't know how to do. What
Mhm.
pieces of your work, like, oh, like I'm not saying I don't have to work at it, but this is something inherent in my skill set versus, oh no, this is something I've had to develop over time and it has been hard won.
Okay. So the first part was what do I think was
Like
inherent
inherent to
in
you, like what do you feel is like your natural talents, proclivities that lend you to do your work so well?
Oh, well, thank you. Um, I would say I always seem to have a facility for writing, but I'll tell you where that came from. I was extremely shy as a child. I couldn't talk in class. I just couldn't. I
Interesting.
could not raise my hand. So I thought I'm gonna get lousy grades unless I compensate some way. So that was the way that I
Have your voice was
compensated.
through the written word. Okay.
Right. Because something had to prop up my grade, something had to lift it up. And I just couldn't raise my hand and answer the questions. And whenever you'd get the grade of oral participation,
Yeah,
that,
my report card said she talks too much. So,
oh,
but
okay.
but I understand like what
Uh-huh.
you're saying. Like you realize that that was something something you had to develop. Okay.
Yeah, but it was a compensating strategy, I guess
Yes.
is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And so I sort of, I felt, okay, I have acquired enough over the years because I really think that if you really want to do something, that it's much more important how much effort you put into it. That the really big question is, how much do you want this?
Mm.
Not what are you starting with? Because I believe that you really can acquire and develop it and build on it, and you can get to be good if you're willing to put in the time, put in the effort.
You're
But you have to
tenacious.
really. Hmm?
You're tenacious.
Oh,
You're the dog with the bone in the most possibly, more flattering way. Like if you
right.
want
And
it.
you just don't let go. But it comes from you really have to want it. And I believe that that's true for everybody. I really do. I see a lot of people who just say, I don't really want it that much.
Mm.
And then there becomes a myth that some people are kind of hit by a bolt of lightning with a certain skill. And I don't believe that. I also don't think it's even useful to think that way because then you disqualify yourself. I think it's much more useful to think of, I want to do this and I'm not letting anybody stand in my way. And if they do, I'm just going to keep going. And sometimes you can wear, you can wear down your adversaries, I think, or
Interesting.
um, just by, that's a great word, tenacity. Um, and
That is a heart of a researcher, right? Is
yes, yeah, right.
is
Is you don't give up. Well, it's got to be somewhere. It's not here. How else could I find it? Where else could I go? And for me, a lot of that sort of I don't know what the right word is, but maybe tangential thinking would come like late at night when I'm just sort of tooling around the internet. Well, why don't I try over there? Or why don't I try this? Or if I can't find something, try alternate spellings of
yes.
and then things pop up and you just keep going, I think.
No, that's amazing. So then it's all been, so what you're saying to me, yes, you might have had certain proclivities, but what I'm hearing you say is that that's actually the less important question versus
Mm,
the will, the tenacity, the curiosity. It doesn't really matter what you're inherently good at or actually inherently lacking. It's really,
right.
those are not the interesting questions, is what I'm hearing from you. What's interesting is um, so I'm gonna say, what are the success stories of Gibbs girls? We're gonna get right to that too.
Okay.
I'm gonna, since I'm hearing that that's a thing that people want to have,
Okay.
let's give you
Talk about
some highlights.
Mhm. Okay, good. Okay, one of them, Joy Hummel, who writes the Wonder Woman comic books
Yes.
in the 40s. And how does she gets a job at age 19. How does she get it? Because her psychology professor at Catherine Gibbs is William Moulton Marston, who created Wonder Woman. And that there's something that we didn't talk about is the academic component of the Gibbs education.
Mm,
That was really, really strong. And these were not
yeah.
low-level professors. Catherine Gibbs brought in the best. And by that, I mean she brought moonlighting professors from Columbia, from Harvard,
She got
from
everybody. Like she
Brown.
was amazing. And
Right.
she's
And
very
she,
charming. I loved the pieces that you put in there of how she wooed these professors
you're
to,
right.
to do that. And
Right.
then
She
they'd stay for
charmed them.
years. Yeah.
Right, right, yeah. So, okay, so William Moulton Marston needs an assistant. He's had a bunch of men and they don't work out, and I think he was in his 50s or so. He needs somebody to help him with the teenage slang, and
Yes.
he said that she wrote the best final exam he had ever read, not just at Catherine Gibbs, but anywhere at any of
Amazing.
like at Harvard, at Tufts, at wherever he had taught, that was the best he'd written. So he hires her and she writes these stories for several years. And she has a great old time because she has a wonderful imagination. And some of the
Amazing.
stories she came up with were zany. And I think she kept the Wonder Woman character alive because he became seriously ill
Oh,
shortly after
I
hiring
didn't
her.
know that.
He polio, and he was debilitated by that. And then he got cancer. And so she really took over many of the functions. He wasn't able to go into the office. She had to like review the final versions. She had to go over the artwork, make sure everything was the way it
Yeah.
was
Yeah. So
supposed to
she,
be.
and it,
And
thank goodness, because that Wonder Woman was one of the only comics I did read in the 70s. And there
yeah,
you go.
okay,
What
good.
other highlights? We listen,
Okay,
we
go.
don't want to we know we don't want to just focus on exceptionalism, but we also have the ones that we want to highlight. So who else was
Okay.
a favorite of
Okay,
yours?
well, we've got Loretta Swit,
Yes.
okay,
Oh,
who
who
went to the
just
Montclair
passed. May
to
she rest in
right,
power and peace. Yes.
right. I was able to interview her for the book. She was lovely. She was charming. She went to the
She
school that
was
was named
in for people who don't know, which I'm sure you're all going to roll your eyes at me, but just to make sure, she was Hot Lips in MASH
right
and
on the TV
on the
series. Yeah,
TV series.
the
Yes.
the duration. Right. So she went to the Montclair School of Catherine Gibbs, and she had very vivid memories of her teachers. She would say, "Oh, Mrs. Brundage always used to walk in like this." She loved it. What the school did for her is she became a Kelly girl, and so she was able to support herself as a struggling actor for
Mm,
about 10 years until she finally broke through. But she didn't have boring jobs. She
yeah.
had like really interesting jobs. So she really credited that school. She said she had a great time. Claire Ferraro is another woman. Started as as a secretary typist at McGraw-Hill, I think, becomes president of Viking Books.
Amazing.
And one of the stories I loved about her, which she told me, was she said she walked into one of her bosses and she said, I'll stay with you for X number of years, but if you don't promote me, like I'm leaving, I'm going to another company because some other company will.
Yes.
And the guy was not happy to hear that, but he heard her and he promoted her. So
I love that.
she moves up the line. We have Catherine Toll,
Yes.
who was at Berkeley, and the irony, Berkeley, the bastion of liberal thinking,
Right?
sees her only as a secretary. And by the way, she had her undergraduate education at Berkeley. They won't admit her to the PhD program because you're a woman.
Right?
They stick her, in the publishing arm, but not even working on the prestigious books. And she's there for a while. World War II is what really saves her. Of all places, the Marines, the manly Marines, recognize her ability. She becomes the head of the Women's Marines, and she loves that job. She
Mm,
leaves it only because there's a mandatory retirement age, and she stays till her very last day. They give her a parade, but they promote her, and she is on par. She couldn't be any higher the rank than a colonel, but
right.
she insisted, again, here's the confidence coming in when she's negotiating for that job, she says, I want to report directly to to the top. I don't want an
Yeah,
intermediate layer of management. So she's on the level with generals,
amazing.
and she's reporting to the top. Um, who else do we have? Oh, Mary Slattery Stoltz. I really liked her a lot. She had a very troubled teenage years. She was like kicked out of her high school, then they took her back. She had a lot of like emotional difficulties. Again, a difficult childhood. She goes to Katharine Gibbs, and she's in a very different environment, and she um I think that was really a pivotal experience for her. She becomes a best-selling young adult author, and she's one of the first who's writing serious young adult books. And she writes, I forget how many books, but she has a number of bestsellers. That's really a great career. She has an international audience. Then there's Ethel Bent Walsh, who becomes acting head of the EEOC when it's an absolute mess in the 70s. She like gets it to shape up. She
Yeah.
shepherds some important cases. So those are just some of them. There are
Well,
many
those are
more.
beautiful. I love each one of them, and each of them could have their own book. I mean, it's amazing to me,
Yeah,
right?
and the range of it, again, going back, oh, that isn't that just a secretarial school that, they became secretaries or maybe they stayed in the business world? No, they're all over they're all over the field. They're, you
Beautiful.
name it, an industry, and there's a Katharine Gibbs um,
Yeah,
graduate there. So
absolutely. So, I want to give some time. I can feel that people might want to share their own uh, connection to the
oh,
Catherine
that'd
Gibbs
be great.
School. They
Hmm.
might have their own questions.
Hmm.
And we're going to go with that till like 3:35 before we wind down. But Kate, I would love to be able to, by the way, a Catherine Gibbs School graduate herself,
Hmm.
our marketing manager, director of
Yes.
for the book. So we have one in our presence right here. So like what a segue. So oh goodness. If you want to share real quick, Kate, anything like I got a little bit of a taste of what you got out of your experience. Is there
Mhm.
anything you'd want to share with our audience before we open up the questions?
Well, yeah, sure. I didn't have a lot of memories of it until Vanda, you started to ask me questions
Hmm.
before this started. And so as you've been talking, I have been off screen and I've been doing a little Google searching to try to remember the street where I went to school in Boston. It was a summer program then. I think that by the 80s, I graduated in 1982 from college. My parents suggested I perhaps go to Catherine Gibbs for the summer and get some skills that I didn't get as a college student. Might help me get a job. And it was on Newbury Street in Boston, Massachusetts.
Hmm.
Um, and I can only imagine that because, as you touched upon, times changed in the 70s and the 80s and late 60s as well for women a little bit, the women's movement. So by the time I was there, I was very much of the mindset that I don't really want these skills.
Mhm.
My
Hmm.
parents made me do it.
Hmm.
Fair.
And I didn't see a connection to learning how to type and do shorthand to having the really great career I was hoping to have, even though I wasn't even sure what that career was going to be when I graduated with an English degree. Um, so my memories of it are that I learned great typing skills, great shorthand skills, but I also did learn certain etiquette
Hmm.
and comportment, which at the time, as an 18 year, no, I was 22-year-old,
You were
uh,
a baby. Yeah.
in the early 80s, I kind of resented a smidge. I'm not gonna lie.
Taking a picture of me. I'm sorry, I had to do that just so I could put it on my social after. Go ahead.
Okay.
So yeah.
So anyway, that was in a nutshell what I can add to this.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that. And it's interesting how you can see how you've had to reframe through the years that time. I want to open up questions. I want to give people times to share their stories or have their questions. So, Kate, I'll let you and Richard sort of pick out.
So Hillary would like to know what the tuition was like. Was tuition a barrier for some, or was the program more accessible?
Great question. The tuition was high, but it was comparatively it was affordable because one of the like in that mid-century period, or well, really what we're talking about is really 1917 through 68, which is, sort of the when it's really roaring along. But I forget how the numbers translate. Let's just say it was expensive, relatively expensive, but you could flip it over and you could say, well, if you're the parents of a girl who's done well in high school, do you want to send her to a 4-year college or do you want to put her in Catherine Gibbs for 2 years? And it was considerably cheaper to do the 2 years. And if you're getting those professors from from Harvard, from Columbia, from Wellesley, from Brown, and they are teaching everything. They're teaching a lot of academic subjects in addition to what we've talked about, the skills and the comportment and the how to dress. But you're getting economics, world government, literature. They really went very heavy on English, on English composition, on English literature, music, all kinds of music. You're getting a really, really good liberal arts education, and very demand. That piece was very demanding. So it's expensive, but if you put it in context, that was it could be a bargain compared to a 4-year liberal arts college. It was
Mm.
a bargain that way. But were there people who were excluded? Yes. Now there were 2 scholarships per year. So, and one of the women that I interviewed did get the scholarship because her parents wouldn't pay for it. So, uh, but 2 scholarships was not many. So I think, Harper, what you mentioned is that there weren't a lot of black students. In fact, there was only one that I could find in the period I was covering who showed up in the yearbook. There might have been more, but those yearbooks did not all the yearbooks, remained accessible. So I think I think that explains why there weren't more black students is well, 2 factors. One is that it was expensive, and if you look at what black families were earning in that period of time, they just weren't earning enough. They were excluded from the professions. So that's one component. The parents wouldn't necessarily have the money, but let's say they do. Let's say, um, is their daughter going to be able to get the kind of job that Catherine Gibbs is preparing? You have to confront what the employers were. So I think it was just, I don't think,
Most of this is before, I mean, this is after, it's after Jim Crow, but it's before and after Jim Crow, and there's a lot of different, segregate, I hate it's that we have to look at the time, you
yeah,
know.
right, right,
That
right.
doesn't of course that doesn't like, oh, it shouldn't have happened. Of course, this was terrible, but it just
Right.
wasn't the same sort of
But
access.
I guess the point I was trying to get to is I don't think that anybody was deliberately excluded. I think it was a process of self-selection that
Mm.
they just didn't apply, and you can't accept people who don't apply.
So there
So
wasn't anything in the records as you were going through.
no, no,
Okay.
not at all. And in fact, when I found that that one young woman who was in it was a mid 1950s yearbook, and I was able to find a little bit about her background. She was not from a wealthy family. She was from a poor family.
Mm.
But there she is, and God bless her for that. I wish I could have found out what happened to her.
Yeah, those are the haunting ghosts for historians.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone named Catherine, shared that she was a Gibbs grad
Oh,
from Boston, the same school I went to in 83, 84. So just 1 and 2 years after I was there. She says she remembers wearing stockings and a dress or a skirt every day. And that was a shock for me, as I told you before we started, that I had been wearing blue jeans my entire college career. And then suddenly, yeah, I had to wear like I was going to work,
That's right.
mm. Right, right.
which was a really good practice for me. So
Right.
thank you for sharing that story, Catherine. Someone else has said, from what I know, let's see, from what I know, is this that the program did end. Do you think that there is any possibility that someone would restart this program? And if so, do you think more students would be motivated to attend as opposed to how it was before?
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of think that the moment has passed for that kind of school. I just don't see people willing to be. I mean, first of all, I think there are so many more opportunities available, so many different pathways that are available. I don't know that the need is there as much. I mean, it is. You really should be prepared to confront the workforce, but whether people realize that, whether young people, young women would realize that is a big question mark. Um,
Maybe it would be, where the heart of it of we're going to teach you, maybe it's coding, maybe it's other things that are maybe more
oh,
AI or
okay.
internet based. So it's not
Mhm.
typing anymore, but
Okay.
it's all the technical parts of things to support so that yeah, you're learning. Like maybe it'd be the same model but with different types of classes because I
Hmm.
still think that college kids or community college or high school graduates are coming out without some of them have never learned to balance a checkbook or
Hmm.
financial fluency or things that are more tech related. And how often have do we enter a job that's
Hmm.
entry level job, and you might be hired for one aspect, but there's especially if it's underfunded or it's just what have you, and they're like, well, can someone do this? Can someone do that? And
Hmm.
also to have a program not just teaching those skills, but teaching about working with different types of people and how to develop a little bit more resiliency and confidence. And so the model could still exist. It wouldn't be the same thing, but the core
Yeah.
principles. That's how
Hmm.
I would see. I think that there's a need for it, for
Hmm.
sure. But that's a
Yeah,
great question. Wasn't that a great
that
question?
is a really good question. Hmm.
Or even how to teach dress etiquette and how to communicate with people since social anxiety has become so common. Oh, so
Ah,
true.
yeah,
So true.
yeah.
And especially when dealing with hostile work environments. This is true. It's, a lot of us do work from home, but a lot of us are also being pulled back into offices.
Hmm.
And that is creating anxiety for people. How do you handle all these different environs and what have you? Again, so maybe people are finding a lacuna in this, and someone out there will become the new Katharine Gibbs and
Yeah, that would be
start
great.
selling,
Yeah,
right?
that would, right.
Sure.
To be that bridge between the academic education and then and then the realities of the working world and how to get ahead because you don't get taught that
I
in
do think
college.
that's something that if you're going to be paying, whether you're on scholarship or what, or if your parents are paying out of pocket, whether it's community college or whether it's the 4 year school, I think every school should have components of this of these are here's some financial, technical skills, here's some social skills as well.
Mm,
I feel
hmm.
like that to me is a lot more important than some of
Hmm.
like instead of having a repeat of general education, which a lot of the first 2 years of college are. It ends
Hmm.
up being this regurgitation of what a lot of people did in high school.
Hmm.
Could we filter that with some of this? I mean, I
Yeah.
just,
I think Jen has a good comment here. She says a
please.
program like this would have been very helpful for me after my MA. Didn't know what I wanted to do and was very intimidated by the business world. And I think that
Get it.
perhaps that's the case for many women more so than men. This intimidation of
Hmm.
entering into the business world. So,
So well said.
comment on that, Vanda?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that, that there's no, you need a smooth pathway and you need to be educated as to what to expect, how to handle yourself. I had the same experience. I didn't know, I was unprepared for the working world. They hand you the diploma, good luck. What am I
What was your
supposed to do
first
with
job
this?
after your master's? What was your first job? What was your experience?
Well, I went back. There was like a long period
Okay.
between undergraduate and graduate, but what I came out from the master's program with was previously I'd been a journalist, and I just came out with, well, I don't see why I can't write a book. It hadn't written one before, and again, that's getting to the, how much do you want it? Oh, you can't write a book. You don't know what, you're not an author, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, people write books and everybody has to start with the first one. So so I wasn't like really doing that, but coming out of undergraduate, I was just totally unprepared. I mean, I wish we had no job counseling, none whatsoever. And I look back and I'm astounded, like, you know, why was all this invested when okay, maybe I'm a cultured person, but I can't do anything, or I can do things, but I don't know how to apply it. Like, I don't know what that bridge is. And so I really would have welcomed to Catherine Gibbs' education
Yes,
at that point.
it's true. So you would have saved yourself some of the fumblings or the heartaches or the confusion or just the panic sometimes, right?
Yeah, and confusion and lack of confidence,
Yes.
putting up with things that I probably shouldn't have put up with, and lack of planning,
Mm,
lack of, again, the Catherine
vision.
Gibbs, your first 5 years, you've got to plan your career. That didn't occur to me.
No, absolutely. So
We
it's
have another great question. I
yeah.
think that we can round out the event with this
Mhm.
question. How
Yes.
was your process of writing this book?
Oh,
The process. Okay. Well, once I reoriented from the biography of Catherine Gibbs to the social history, then I had to figure out how am I going to organize it? How am I going to, how am I going to research it? So, from the previous book that I'd done, I think I learned a lot about researching and scouring the internet. But I did have to make several research trips back to the East Coast, finding the material. And I have to say, a lot of people say, well, can't you just do everything on the internet? No. You have to go and look through the boxes. And because the really good stuff is not going to be digitized. You have to go, you have to sit in that library, have them pull the boxes. And that's what
mm,
I did. I went to Smith, I went to Harvard, went to Radcliffe, went to Brown, and they pulled the stuff out, and you're looking at things that nobody has seen. How to organize the book. Okay. I really think, some people may have more creative strategies or focuses, but go chronologically because that's the way people live their lives. And also, you see how over time, like one thing leads to another, and sometimes you have something happening that's a reaction to what happened historically before or that builds on it. So I really think this idea, like stick with chronology. It's easy, as opposed to maybe arranging something thematically. Again, we move through time. We live our lives moving through time. And so that was um, that was the basic structure. And then to look at how do women's roles change and what surrounding them in the social culture historical moment, what are the factors that are impinging on that are defining that are defining what women should be, which is the context in which individuals make their choices.
such
So,
great sage points. I feel like you need to be teaching historical writing and research. You have come up with the things that you are probably thinking are prosaic. I am
mhm.
telling you we're not, so
Oh, oh.
if you there's in the link in the chat is a link to buy the book. I have the cover right here. Thank you to your publisher for sending it because I couldn't read on a screen.
Mhm.
It is so worth the purchase. It's also a great gift for as the holidays are coming up, especially for your girl power girlies and everything else. It has been my honor and pleasure
Oh,
to talk with you today, Vanda, and for Kate to be part of Fall for the Book. It is
Oh, well, thank you,
yeah.
Harper and Vanda. Thank you so much.
Oh,
This was a really fun, going back in time
you
for
really did.
all of
It
us.
was
yeah.
And yeah, so people are jumping on and saying, excellent book. Thank you so
Oh, thank you.
much. So yeah, thank you both. We
thank you
appreciate
to the audience. Thank you for coming in the middle of your
Yes.
day.